B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We are back here with our Jewish intimacy series, learning the issues of Kedusha, of holiness, about the marital union between a man and his wife. Anyone that has watched the first half a dozen or so lectures that we've done about this series knows that this is unlike any other teachings that's available out there online, simply because the holiness of the Ramban is simply coming out of the book. The words are jumping out, whether it's words of Kabbalah or the rest of the words of the sages and the Torah itself. Its intimacy will never be the same for anyone that really takes this to heart. Tonight's shiur will be for the Refuah Shlema for Rabbanit Levana Bat Sarah, Rav Ephraim Ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah Bat Anat, Avi Mori David Ben Esriya, Imi Morati Doris Bat Jora, and also for the Atzlacha Rabbah for Marcia Bat Julie and her children, and all of Am Yisrael and all the righteous Noahides that continue to contribute and help us in all the amazing things that the organization is doing. As a update for everyone, anyone that wants to contribute to the new movie that's coming out, B'ezrat Hashem, in less than a month, the Gehenom movie, you can go to gehenom.com, so you could avoid going to Gehenom. It's the movie itself, Baruch Hashem, is completed. We're still waiting to see if anybody else wants to jump on the Kiruv train by contributing enough to have their name added to the credits of the film. The opportunity is only going to be available for another week. Once that's done, it's done. I mean done permanently, simply because it's going to be once the movie is out there, we're not going to change it. The only other opportunities there will be with things that will be similar, but not quite the same. Aside from that, Baruch Hashem, we have a word from one of the people that we're relying on for this series, the great ancestor, descendant of the Ramban himself, Rav Yaakov Bar Nachman, who translated the Iggeret HaKodesh, that Be'ezrat Hashem, in the not too distant future, there's going to be a new edition of this Sefer coming out. Be'ezrat Hashem, I know that many of you have tried to buy this Sefer, buy this book online, and it's nowhere to be found. But Be'ezrat Hashem, this will be out in the stores at some point in the next year, probably when we're much deeper into the series, but needless to say, always going to be valuable, especially for those of you that are watching this at a later time or want to review or anything like that. So that Be'ezrat Hashem is going to be coming out very soon, Be'ezrat Hashem. So with that being said, we have completed the first chapter of the Iggeret HaKodesh, where the Ramban has taught us everything about how there is a huge necessity to prepare. In so many words, if you prepare for holiness, you could achieve holiness, you could attain it. If you don't prepare, then there's quite frankly nothing distinguishing you from an animal of any kind. Whether you want to choose to compare yourself to a horse or a cat, a dog, or an elephant, that remains your choice. But nonetheless, to achieve holiness, it's not something that comes for free. It's not something that comes easily. It's not something that can come with just with anyone. It's something that everyone can attain. And as the Ramban actually mentions later on in his book, and even earlier, this is actually something that can be attained both by Jews and Gentiles. But needless to say, it does require an enormous amount of preparation and not just the focus on the act itself. In fact, in order to attain holiness, most of what is necessary takes place before the act itself, before the act of intimacy itself. And he finished the first chapter by letting us know that the issue of intimacy, as far as the whole act itself, or to the whole acquiring of holiness, is something that requires 5 different paths. The first one is the path of the essence of the marital union. This is what we'll start reviewing tonight, B'ezrat Hashem, the essence of the marital union. The second path is the time of the marital union, what time of the day you're doing it, and believe it or not, it has an enormous amount of weight is relying on the time itself, not just time of the month, but even time of the day. The third path is the proper diet prior to the marital union. What you eat is also going to influence what comes out of you, what you could actually produce in the world, both for females and for males. And this is not just, in essence, the egg or the seed, but other things as well, which we'll discuss later on, B'ezrat Hashem. The fourth path is the intent prior to and during the marital union. This is the part where what's on a person's mind and what they need to have on their mind before the actual marital union, as well as during the marital union. And the last part is the quality of the marital union. So all of these are going to be discussed in the series. We're going to begin chapter 2 of the Sefer, which is the first path, which is the essence of the marital union. Now, the interesting thing about giving shiurim online and reaching all four corners of the world is that you have all types of people watching these shiurim, whether it's this series or, Baruch Hashem, the several thousand other videos that we have online. And many times different videos will impact different people in different ways. And in fact, many times new people come along because something, clicked to them, something that they saw in the title, something that they saw as a picture, something they heard about from somebody, influenced them to actually watch the video. And Baruch Hashem, many times, more times than not, they end up going on a video binge, where they start watching video after video after video. The good thing is about that is that it allows people to learn an enormous amount of Torah that took countless hours and days and months and years to attain. But even more than that, it allows them to actually get it all on a silver platter. The problem, the downside with it is that if a person doesn't prepare themselves with some of the prerequisites, and they jump on into something that's more advanced, like this particular series, many times they could lose themselves, find themselves very confused, or sometimes simply disconnect. Now, this, Baruch Hashem, this is the reason why we try to break things down in as simple format as possible, so it's something that could really be understood by anybody. But even more than that, it's also something that we take to heart when we're actually, preparing everything and trying to figure out what is going to, affect your average person out there. What is relevant to the average person out there. And quite frankly, this is exactly the way of the Ramban, where he's not talking to the most holy people on planet Earth. He's talking to the average person. The average person that can attain holiness during their marital union. Meaning that although they're not currently, in more cases than not, he's telling us that they can, that we all can attain this extraordinary, elevated level of holiness that is unlike any other, which will both create a spiritual pleasure as well as a physical pleasure. But of course, this again requires preparation. This requires a completely different mindset. And one of the things that is not very common, but yet is common enough to be a problem in enough marriages to cause divorces or just simply a separation of the two people to such an extent that they're more like roommates than they are a married couple, is their appreciation of intimacy altogether, their understanding of it, of its purpose, and many times this could actually lead people to become disgusted by the act. Again, this is not very common for the average person, but it's common enough where it's literally destroyed enough marriages and enough lives where there are many people, where sometimes men, sometimes women, that are simply disgusted by the act. I can tell you from helping quite a few people, it's more common among women than it is among men. But nonetheless, there are many people out there that view intimacy, and they obviously call it a different world. They view it as something disgusting. They view it as something unholy. They view it as something distasteful, loathsome, and so on and so forth. And there is certainly a reason for it. And the main reason for it is simply their lack of understanding of not only the way to do it, but the essence itself. What is the essence? What is the purpose of intimacy altogether? Is it simply to be like animals, where one man is with another woman, and they're supposed to get some type of physical pleasure and relief? Or is there something more to it? And I can assure you that anyone, regardless of whether your predisposition is that you enjoy it and you like it and it's fun, or you simply hate it and you find it completely disgusting, if you apply this along with your spouse, certainly your life will be changed forever. Because your servitude of God will go to a level that it cannot get to without this. Meaning, you can learn all of the books in the world that are in the Torah, that are full of holiness, that are full of extraordinary things, and still not attain the level of holiness that you could attain if you add this to it. Now, on the other hand, if a person simply wants to jump on board just to do this, and not read the books, not follow the Torah, not follow the mitzvot, then certainly they're not going to succeed, as we've already learned from the Ramban during the first chapter, which is the preparation itself, which is a person needing to sanctify themselves because their objective in life is to sanctify the name of God. That's their objective in life, to sanctify the name of God. A person that desecrates the name of God by disobeying Him, by mocking Him, by simply ignoring Him altogether and being ungrateful to everything that he does for Him on a regular basis, is obviously incapable of sanctifying God's name. So the first chapter is very important. That's why if anybody's just clicking in here for the first time, I would recommend you go back to the first lecture and watch it one after another. But nonetheless, there's still going to be value for anyone that watches this, even from this point on. It's just that it's going to be very, very easy for you to lose yourself and not really understand the purpose behind a lot of the things that we're going to say. So the Ramban in chapter 2, the first path, discusses the essence of marital union. And one of the things that he's actually going to discuss here is this particular attitude, this predisposition that people have as far as the way they view intimacy. Many times you have people that are couples that have marital problems that are not because of money, they're not because of the children, they're not because of work, but rather because of their attitude towards intimacy. Their attitude towards intimacy are a world apart, and it sometimes can even lead the couple to have a huge barrier between the two, where one of them simply can't stand the day that they have to be intimate, and if they want to stay married, they still do it, or simply they give up on the marriage and they simply tell their partner that this is what you have, you just have me and you're in physical form, but not anything else. I'm not going to be intimate with you. And of course, sometimes people settle for that, which is a mistake. Because the Torah says if a wife or a husband does not want to be intimate, the marriage is over. Intimacy is certainly a very important part of Jewish marriage. Nonetheless, any other marriage, but again, it's not the top priority, especially if you don't know what is the essence of intimacy. So the Ramban says, know this, that the union of a man with his wife is divided into two parts. The first is holy and pure when done properly, in the proper time and with the proper state of mind and intention. No one should think that marital union, when done properly, is disgraceful and loathsome. God forbid. For proper union is called knowing, as we see from Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. For good reason it is called thus, for it is said by the prophet Shmuel, in chapter 1, verse 19 in Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel 1, and Elkanah knew his wife. These are the parents of Shmuel. And this knew his wife is defining that they were intimate. The secret for this is that when the drop of semen is drawn in holiness and purity, it comes from the source of wisdom and knowledge and understanding, which is the brain. And realize that if this matter was not one of great holiness, then the union would not be called knowing by God Himself. Up to here is what we'll try to cover. Of course, there's a whole lot more material, but this is, trust me when I tell you, more than enough. More than enough for us to cover tonight, Be'ezrat Hashem. So, first and foremost, the Ramban tells us that the union is between a man and his wife is divided into two parts, and the two parts are holiness and purity. So the first thing that anyone that is learns Torah knows is that the sages, like the Torah itself, the 5 books of Moses itself, like the prophets, like the writings, where God made sure that each and every single word is placed there carefully for a reason. So an average person, for example, a person that's reading the Torah, like the fools from Christianity that are worshiping some guy, or the heretics from Islam that are also worshiping some guy, but just in a different form, even though he was illiterate, somehow he wrote a book, even though he was unholy, somehow he spoke to an angel and murdered a bunch of Jews thereafter, even though he said that they are the people of the book. And if you find some type of misconception or misunderstanding in the Quran, go to the people of the book, even though later on he says you should kill them. So of course, these types of people, the way they read any text is in a simple, what do you see is what you get. But that's not the way we learn Torah. That's not the way the people of the book, the Jewish people, read the Torah, because that's not the way that God wrote it. He wrote every single thing in a specific manner, using specific words and even specific spelling for every single thing in order to teach us an innumerable amount of lessons from each and every single verse. And just like their God, the students, the sages, also write their writings in a similar fashion, obviously in human form and to their best capacity, where every single word is placed there for a specific reason to teach us. So if somebody's reading, there's the first part, is holy and pure when done properly. So the average person reads, okay, so it's holy and pure. What can you possibly learn from that? The first thing that you learn from it is that if it's holy and pure, that means that it can be holy, which in Hebrew is kadosh, but it doesn't necessarily need to be pure. That is a different level. It can be nothing. In fact, there's 7 different levels we'll discuss today. It can be nothing. It can be holy, but not pure. But it could also, you could attain the holiness and purity. There are, of course, sub-levels within it, which we'll discuss. But here we see that the Ramban is telling us that there is holiness and there is purity that can be attained if it's done properly, in the proper time, and with the proper state of mind. Now, Rav Shimshon Pinkus, Alav Shalom, he said that when he learned Kabbalah, he understood the world very differently than he ever did from all of the other learning that he did before, where he realized how the small act in this world has an extraordinary implications in the upper worlds, where we're not here just living here as some piece of meat that eventually is going to be eaten by the maggots. Every single act that you do here, whether it's walking, running, eating, speaking, learning, whatever it is, every single one of the acts that you do here has an extraordinarily higher level of impact in the upper worlds. What are these upper worlds? So according to our holy Kabbalah, we have these 4 worlds: the Olam HaAtzilut, Olam HaBriya, Olam HaYetzirah, and Olam HaAsiyah. So anyone that knows a little bit of Hebrew knows that you have the upper worlds as the Atzilut, you have the Briya, which is in essence the creation, you have the Yetzirah, formation, and the Asiyah, which is the doing, the actions here. Perhaps the translations are not perfect, but these are the names of the four worlds. And when a person learns Kabbalah, when they're at a level to be able to learn Kabbalah and understand it, they'll see the world very differently. Now, the reason why we add this little few words that says when they're ready to understand it is because if a person, like unfortunately too many people do today, simply jumps to the world of Kabbalah, not only will they not understand it properly, but many times it could lead them to becoming heretics. Many times the teachings of Kabbalah that are learned by a person that is not fit, both spiritually and otherwise, to learn these teachings, can actually arrive at heretical thoughts, confusion, and many times get to go in the wrong direction. Now, if a person understands that each and every single one of their actions has a huge implications in the upper worlds, it's good. But of course, our human mind needs something to compare it to. So Rabbi Ephraim gave an extraordinary, simple analogy, which is, anyone remember, or perhaps you still see these, bell towers. These huge bells where you have this enormous bell on the top of a tower. And in the old days, this was something that was much more common than it is today. Now, this huge bell, how do they make all the sound, all the noise to make sure that they wake up every person and get every person's attention for, could be even miles away? By ringing it. But how? There's a little tiny rope on the bottom of this huge tower, under this enormous bell that could literally be 1 story high in itself. But if the guy goes on the bottom and moves this little rope on the bottom, that little rope causes enough shaking to the rope as it travels up the tower that causes this huge, enormous bell to ring. Now, this is a perfect explanation for how what an average person would think. What's the big deal that I ate this? What's the big deal that I said this? What's the big deal that I saw this? What's the big deal that I heard that? Or the average person has an evil inclination telling him that everything you do is insignificant, there's not much of a big deal. So what? God is too big to care about your little measly acts. Move on with your life and continue sinning, continue going and doing whatever it is that you want. Not realizing that the magnitude of that little action could literally be more than a person could even comprehend, even if they thought about it 24 hours a day from the beginning of their life until the end of their life. But this is why our sages taught us the Torah in such a fashion where at times they have to break it up for the average person to understand that even if you cannot truly comprehend how this bell works, where you take this little rope on the bottom and it causes this huge bell on top to work, still, once you realize it works, that's it. You don't need further explanations. You just get the point. The same concept with Kabbalah. Even if a person, which is the overwhelming majority of the world today, is not fit to learn Kabbalah for different reasons, whether it's because they haven't studied enough Torah, or they're female, or they're a child, or whatever, or they're not Jewish, whatever the reason is, that they're not able to learn Kabbalah, simple. When you hear of these types of things, such as the upper worlds, this world or this angel or that angel, you don't necessarily need to truly, fully comprehend it, like you comprehend perhaps your diet. Simple, you need to know this is how it works, get the basic gist, and move on. So the Chachamim teach us that this marital union that has a lot more implications on our day-to-day life than perhaps our understanding of the upper worlds. Marital union is completely misunderstood by the overwhelming majority of society throughout all of the generations. Because what most people think of when they think of intimacy, they think of a physical act. They think of something that they could, through it, they could attain some type of physical pleasure. Perhaps they could express an emotion, whether that be an emotion of love or otherwise. But attaining holiness is not something that's very common in the minds of people, especially the non-Jews. And unfortunately, in the ignorant world we live in today, also most of the Jews themselves today too. So holiness and intimacy are not necessarily things that always go together. But even those that are aware that you can attain intimacy, many times are unaware of how to attain it and simply unaware that they're not attaining it. Because if you don't know how, it simply guarantees you that you're not going to be able to do it. Because to attain it is not just simply doing the act and just thinking good. It has a little bit more to it. So there are, the Ramban says that these different parts, and a person has to make sure that they have everything in order as far as their the holiness and purity is attained through what their state of mind. But most importantly, a person should never ever begin, before you even start addressing the different types of levels in marital union. The first thing first that the Ramban addresses is that no one should ever think that marital union, when it's done properly, is something disgraceful and loathsome, God forbid. This is why we began the shiur this way. And in fact, the Ramban goes even further into it later on in the next shiur, next week, Bezrat Hashem, where he goes to town against the wicked, cursed Greek, the Aristotle, that actually in his writings, that's actually quoted by the Rambam, and which the Ramban Nachmanides rebukes over. He quotes the Rambam quotes Aristotle in the Guide to the Perplexed in Volume 2, Section 36, where he actually praises Aristotle. He praises Aristotle for stating that the sense of touch is shameful to us. Aristotle, in his words, were very, very different than his actions, and we'll discuss some of his actions perhaps next week, Bezrat Hashem. But he actually says that what the Ramban, Nachmanides, here is calling outright heresy and simply foolishness. He calls the sense of touch, the intimacy, the touching between a man and his wife, something that is shameful. Now this, of course, is not just the thought process in the philosophical, demented world of Aristotle, but many of his students till this day feel similar, but also in the world of Christianity. This is a common belief, hence the reason why their so-called holiest people claim to be celibate, where the Pope doesn't marry a woman. Somehow there's always a orphanage connected to the church, and there's always a nun that somehow appears pregnant, and the Pope happens to be nice to her during that week or that time or that period. But nonetheless, they claim that in order to attain their highest level of holiness, a person has to stay away from physical intimacy. Stay away from it. Why? Because it's animalistic, it's distasteful, it's shameful. Very, very similar understanding to what Aristotle taught. I mean, they're not far apart, their beliefs. This, of course, again, is something that's also very similar in the world of Islam, where the way that they treat and abuse their women is unlike any other civilization. Literally, in modern day, the things that you hear about, you read about of what they do to their women, castrating them, abusing them, beating them, doing all types of awful things, literally treating their women worse than they treat a beast. Even a beast, you don't neuter. You're not allowed, not whether you're a Jew or a Gentile. God forbids, prohibits anyone from neutering and from cutting the organs, the sexual organs of any creature. But needless to say, this is something that is part of Islam. But even more so than that, they too view it as something that is distasteful, where the woman is not supposed to enjoy it. It's something that only the man is supposed to enjoy. Hence the reason why, if you're a terrorist and you kill a bunch of Jews, according to them, you go to their heaven, which is, between us, it's really hell. But they go to heaven, and where they're going to find 72 virgins, probably also terrorists, so they're probably missing limbs. But nonetheless, this is the mentality of the world at large. even though their actions are quite the opposite, meaning although they find intimacy as and physical touch distasteful, loathsome, abominable, animalistic, whatever you want to call it, if you actually look at their actions, generally speaking, aside from money and honor, the number one thing that they chase is women. So the actions are one thing, and the words are quite different, similar to what the Torah says about the wicked people, that in their mouths and their hearts, in their mouths they say they love me, but in their hearts they're very distant from me. So it's important for a person to know that only in the Holy Torah do we have specific teachings that are in this fashion, that actually not only call the act as something that is special and is important, but even more so is something that can allow a person to attain the highest level of Kedusha that is humanly possible. So this is why the Holy Torah begins in Genesis and says that the proper union is called knowing. Where is that? Where do we know that? In chapter 4, verse number 1, it says, "V'Adam yada et Chava ishto, v'tar v'taled et Kain, v'tomer kaniti ish et Adonai." And now Adam, the first man, had known his wife Chava, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, "I have acquired a man with Hashem." So here we see that the Holy Torah, in one of many places, calls the act of intimacy, when done properly, knowing, knowledge. So the Ramban says this has extraordinary ramifications, because there's for good reason that it's called knowledge. And there's another place that the Ramban is quoting, saying that when Elkanah, the father of Shmuel was a prophet, Kodesh Kodashim, him and his dear wife Chana, who was also Kodesh Kodashim, where the Gemara in Masechet Brachot says that we learn all of the laws of how to pray the Amidah prayer from Chana. And after she prayed at the Bet HaMikdash, when she came back home, it says, "Vayada Elkanah et Chana ishto v'yizkereha Adonai." It says Elkanah knew Chana, his wife, and Hashem remembered her, meaning that from there came Shmuel. So again, the Torah uses this special word calling the act of intimacy, marital union, knowledge. Quite different than what Aristotle or Islam or the Christians or the secularists will call the act of marital union. And the secret for this, says the Ramban, is because when the drop of semen is drawn in holiness and purity, it comes from the source of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, which is the brain. What does all of this mean? Rav Ephraim explains that there are 7 levels of marital union. 7 levels that this marital union that the Ramban is discussing, you can break it up into 7 different parts that are easily understandable by all. Now, the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, page 75, A, says that one of the losses we had with the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash is not just the temple itself and the connection to God, but also the impact it had on the world, the level of holiness that came down to the world. And the Gemara says that Rabbi Yitzchak says, "Miyom shecharav Bet HaMikdash nitla ta'am biyah, ונתנה לעוברי עבירה, שנאמר, מים גנובים ימתקו, ולחם סתרים ינעם." The Gemara says, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, from the day that the Bet HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, was destroyed, the enjoyment of intimacy was taken from married people and given to sinners who engage in illicit relations. Because what ended up happening is that marriage stopped satisfying people's desires and led people to all types of promiscuity, adultery, sickness. And the people that in essence look like they're enjoying it are the ones that are making sins. Where do we learn this from? We learn this from Shlomo HaMelech in Proverbs, chapter 9, verse 17 is what's quoted here. Mayim gnuvim imtaku velechem starim in'am. Stolen waters are sweet, and bread of secrecy is pleasant. Here Shlomo HaMelech is saying bread is another allusion to women. And he's saying here in this verse that the bread of secrecy, the adulterous intimacy with a married woman is something that is always sounds more pleasant in the mind of the people, where the stolen water sound like they're sweeter, even though it's both water. Obviously, if you take a bottle, you put some water for yourself to drink, and you put your bottle aside. Someone comes and takes your water, drinks it. You stole it. I didn't give you permission to drink my water. Oh, okay. Can I have some of the water? You give them some water. All of a sudden, they take a sip and they don't want to drink the rest. Why? When they stole it, it's tasted sweeter to them. In their mind, of course. How could the same exact water be sweeter one time and another time? Because whatever is forbidden seems like it's more precious, more valuable. There was actually a scientific study done some years ago that without any connection to religion, at least not that I know of, scientists wanted to see how the mind of men works, and they put these group of young men, behind the window, and they wanted them to all tell the scientist which woman is prettier in their eyes. Now, what the people didn't realize is that both of these women were identical twins. And there was really only one difference between them. And it wasn't a physical difference. They both had their hair long, they both had the same complexion, same eyes, same everything else. But there was only one difference between the two. And that difference is that one of these twins was married. And what the scientists were dumbfounded by was the fact that the overwhelming majority of the men chose the married woman as the more attractive woman, fulfilling the verse in the Torah that Shlomo HaMelech says, Mayim gnuvim imtaku. Stolen water are sweeter. Whatever is forbidden looks like it's sweeter, looks like it's better. Because of course, the one that's not married is available if a person wants to court her, wants to be with this woman. Obviously, she's permitted to him. The woman that's married, you can't be with her whether you're a Jew or a Gentile. That would be committing adultery. It's forbidden. In fact, both a Jew and a Gentile will get the death penalty at the time of the Sanhedrin for committing adultery. So here we see that the evil inclination literally comes to life in your modern day man, where they tend to do what is forbidden. They tend to be attracted to what is forbidden. They're more attracted to the woman that is forbidden to them. And this is something that was magnified after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. That's what the Gemara says, because the holiness that the Bet HaMikdash was bringing into the world also impacted the minds of people, and even more so even what happens with them and their wives when the doors are closed. So the key to understand this is that the Gemara is telling us the joy of intimacy was taken away from the people, but it doesn't say that the joy of intimacy was taken away from the tzaddikim. Why? Because the tzaddikim know, when they learn what the Ramban says and other sages have said about intimacy, that you could actually acquire holiness through your act itself. Whereas at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, that was not as that wasn't necessary, because the actual act itself would be holy in itself. So here is something that has changed drastically. Now, these 7 levels of union have everything to do with what we just discussed. Why? Because it proves what the Gemara said about how the joy of intimacy went to the sinners. The first type, or first level of intimacy, is simply the physicality, the animalistic nature of a person, where they simply want to make the sin without any love. No love, casual relationship that could last literally a day or an hour or a minute. No love whatsoever. There's no emotional attachment. This is obviously the standard procedure of many people today that are secular, many people that are promiscuous, many people that are simply unaware of the magnitude of their small actions in this world and what they do to their lives in the upper world as well as in the rest of their life here. Many young men and women are so promiscuous today that they flaunt it, they're proud of it, they even compete with each other of how many partners they have, only to realize just a few years later that this promiscuity has led to depression, has led to disease at times, has led to all types of loneliness, has led to them even becoming disgusted by the act itself. It creates an enormous amount of problems. This is no secret, and it's a common knowledge amongst the both the Jews and the Gentiles. But nonetheless, people still do it because they have no concept of anything being available to them beyond them fulfilling their physical desire. And so the first act, the first way that people look at intimacy is the act itself without any love. And this is what the Chazon Ish said about the secularists, the secular people, the Zionists, that what they call love, we call karet. Meaning, he thinks that, oh, I love my girlfriend, she's the best. I love my boyfriend, he's the best. Even though we're not married, I feel like we are. I feel like I know him forever. I feel like this, I feel like that. And they act like as if they're a married couple, thinking that this little fluffy lust that they have today is actual love. Says the Chazon Ish, what they call love, we call karet. We know that we are disconnecting chas v'shalom, our neshamot from God if we follow what their footsteps are doing. So that act is literally a cutting a person off from God himself. Why? Because God says that the intimacy is one of the ways that a person can achieve knowledge. Knowledge with God himself, knowledge with the upper worlds. A much, much more significant act than just fulfilling the lust of a person. But if a person simply thinks that they were brought to this world to be a donkey, to be a horse, to be a cow, to be a bull, then that's what they'll act like and that's what they'll do. So this type of behavior of animals simply breeds animals. So what can a person expect if he was intimate with a woman before marriage or even during marriage, but they didn't follow the family purity laws, they didn't follow modesty laws, they didn't think any right thoughts. In fact, they thought all the wrong thoughts. He was thinking of all types of women that will turn him on. She was thinking of all types of men that turn her on. They were thinking about what kind of gymnastics they can do. They were thinking about all types of perverted, filthy things in order to achieve the climatic point of the act itself. So in essence, whether they're married or not, doesn't really change much. It's still forbidden because she didn't dip in a mikveh. She didn't follow any of the purity laws. He obviously did not prepare himself with anything holy. He's thinking of something else, which the Gemara says in Masechet Avodah Zarah, a man that thinks of another woman while he's intimate with his wife, that child is considered as if it's a bastard, as if it's a child of a different woman. Now, the reality here is that even if a person doesn't want to consider the upper worlds and eternity and anything else, and he just wants to consider this world, you can actually experiment this yourself. Don't tell anybody that you're doing this, because it'll insult people or they'll take it the wrong way. But simple, look at the children that come out of people that are secular, people that don't have any holiness in their life, or better yet, worse yet, they have idolatry in their life. Look at what they produce. And I'm not talking about look at the baby when he's 3 days old. All babies are cute, more or less. I'm talking about look at the kid when he's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15. Look at what comes out of these people. The parents acted like animals. All they did is breed another animal. There were horses, they have a little horse. There were dogs, they have little puppies. They were like lions, they got a bunch of little lions running around the house. Literally a copy machine. And this is in essence what the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin. This is what the Gemara in Masechet Psachim warns about. People that are not considerate about the religiosity of who they marry their daughter to and who they marry their son to. And the Gemara rebukes and protests against such people, saying that a man should never marry his daughter, and needless to say himself, to the daughter of an Am Haaretz. And needless to say, the son of an Am Haaretz. Person that's an ignoramus of Torah, not religious, secular, even if they observe Shabbat, but they care less about Torah, they just observe it because they're in a community, they don't know anything about Torah. Never marry those people. So long as they're this way, never marry them, and never fall for the trap of saying, no, I'll become more religious once we get married. It's just difficult to be religious when you're single. You're not allowed to follow this trap. Needless to say, you have to understand that if they're not religious for themselves, they're not going to become religious for you. Because religiosity is not something that a person does for anybody else with it having a lasting ground, a lasting foundation. That's what Rabbi Shimon says in the Mishnah in Masechet Avot, that something that depends on something is not going to last. Meaning that if your love is dependent on an act, whether it be intimacy, money, honor, whatever it is, that relationship is not going to survive. So the Gemara says in Masechet Psachim, page 49b, that a person should never marry the daughters of a ignoramus or Am Haaretz, because the Am Haaretz are like vermin and their wives are insects. And regarding their daughters, they're accursed. Accursed is the one who, there's a verse written about them, that accursed is the one who lies with an animal. Their daughters are considered like animals. Why? He says these people that are not observing the holy Torah, when it comes to the act itself that a man and a woman do, they treat it no different than animals do. He wants to get his physical relief. She wants to get her physical relief. They're both aroused for whatever reason or purpose, whether it's by each other or for each other or because of somebody else or something else. Unfortunately, doesn't really make much of a difference in their minds. They simply have a fix. They see the other party is available and capable, and they do the act. And the Torah says about such people that they're literally like animals. Where, just like a lion who is ties up his lioness during the act, catches her and doesn't allow her to run away with no shame. That's how the husband in such a way. Just like he cohabits with her with no shame, so does the person. Just like he is at times violent with no shame, so is the husband, so is the wife of a person that does not delve into the world of holiness of the Torah itself. Because when everything is dependent on the physicality of everything, holiness is simply as far away from those people as possible, and the only thing that's left is the animalistic nature that they're created with. So this type of act is obviously despised by God, but unfortunately people that don't follow the Torah fall for this. Now, the prophet Yechezkel discusses how this happened in the past, unfortunately, to our people that left the Torah and followed idolatry. So the Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah says, how could this be? You have the God of Israel that has done endless amount of miracles for our ancestors, whether it's taking out Avraham from the fire at Ur Kasdim, or it's the miracle of opening the gate at the palace of Paro for Yaakov, or it's the miracles for the 10 plagues on Egypt, or it's the miracle of bringing the man from Shamayim, or it's the endless amount of miracles that he did for Am Yisrael in the desert, or splitting the ocean, or even the miracles that you yourself see every single day at the Bet HaMikdash, when there is a fire from heaven comes down in the image of a lion and consumes the Korban. Or the fact that throughout all of the years and centuries that the Bet HaMikdash was around, there was never a single bug anywhere to be found. Now, if you go to an average butcher store, regardless of whether it's kosher or not kosher, you're going to see some flies. If there's meat, you're going to see flies. Even if they're covered, even if the sanitation department lives in a supermarket. Doesn't make a difference. You're going to see some flies. You're going to see some bugs. You're going to see some vermin. You're going to see all types of things. At the Bet HaMikdash, this was not found. There was no such thing as a fly. Even though the meat is right there out in the open. They're slaughtering animals. There's blood everywhere. After the slaughter, not a single fly. That in itself is a miracle. Throughout this entire time, not one woman had a miscarriage. Today, unfortunately, we get bad news from different women around the world where they want us to pray for them because they're pregnant, but they feel like their pregnancy has a complication. And unfortunately, sometimes it ends abruptly with a miscarriage, one of the most painful things that a woman can experience in her life, something that a man will never understand, and quite frankly, something that her friends will never understand, even if they're women, because unless you're a woman that experienced a miscarriage, you're simply never going to understand it, and I promise you it's better you don't understand it. But nonetheless, it's important for a person to be very, very careful with the words that they choose to, when they speak to their friend that is experiencing such a personal trauma that no one can feel, that no one can sense, that no one can understand, aside from another person that went through the same trauma. Many women are stupid where they think that, oh, my friend just went through this. Let me tell everybody else that she just went through this trauma so everybody can say, I'm sorry that you went through it. And that will make her feel better. No, it won't, you idiot. If she wanted to tell the whole world, she'd put it on Facebook. If she told you, that means she wants to confide with you, not with everyone else you know. You just violated our privacy in the most horrific way possible because of your senselessness. But unfortunately, this is something that it doesn't come to a person naturally. So a person needs to understand that if you have women experiencing miscarriages all around the world, needless to say, obviously the abortions that they do on their own that lead to miscarriages later on in their life, which, as a side note, abortion is considered 100% murder in the eyes of God, both for Jews and for Gentiles. Abortion is forbidden for Jews or Gentiles. Forbidden completely. It's considered 100% murder unless the baby's putting the mother's life in physical risk where she could die having that child. But unless that is the case, there's no permission to have an abortion. Doesn't matter if you just met him. It doesn't matter if you like him. It doesn't matter if he's divorcing you. It doesn't even matter if whatever it is. Having an abortion is simply not something that you can play with. But these types of abortions, what a lot of people don't realize, these types of abortions destroy the inner parts of a woman's body to the point where later on in her life, it could create complications to the point where she's not going to be able to have a child, or at least not be able to have a child normally. Or if she does have a child, she's pretty much going to suffer for the rest of her life because of what came out. So people don't take this into account. They just think, nah, listen, the doctor just goes in there. It's like brushing your teeth. It goes in, that's finished. Well, no. There's a lot more goes into it. You're violating the law of God. Certainly it's going to have ramifications. But these types of miscarriages that happen from people that act promiscuously or not, people that want to have a child, they're preparing for a child, they're looking forward for a child, and unfortunately, they have a miscarriage. It's a very painful experience. Rav Tzion Abba Shaul, alav shalom, he said himself, his wife had, I think it was something like 10 or 11 miscarriages. Something that him and the Rabbanit suffered through for many, many years. So it's something that happens, and it's very painful. One of the miracles at the time of the Bet HaMikdash, no miscarriages. Every woman, whether she had one, chas v'shalom, or she's just thinking about what I just said now, knows that's his miracle, no less than splitting the ocean of Yam Suf and the Sea of Jordan. No less, if not even more. So the miracles that Am Yisrael saw at the time of the Bet HaMikdash were not lesser than what they saw in Egypt with the plagues, or at Yam Suf, or at Mount Sinai. They're seeing miracles everywhere. So the question remains, how do you go to some statue? How? So the Gemara gives us the answer. And the Gemara says in Masechet Sanhedrin, page 63b, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, who says it in the name of Rav. Every time in the Gemara, one of the sages teaches something, they always say where they got it from. Because it's important for a person to mention what he says from the source that he got it. The Jews knew that there is no substance to idolatry. And yet, they engaged in idolatry. Why? Only in order to permit for themselves overt immorality. Meaning that the Jews originally did not have any desire for idolatry. This changes later on as a result of their acts. Originally, it wasn't because they wanted to go pray to Yoshke or to some Buddha or to the Baal or any of these other filthy, disgusting idols, which the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin also says it is actually a special mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to not only never say the name of the idols, whether it be Yoshke or the Baal or any of the other things, unless it's written, the name is written in the Torah, but it's actually a special mitzvah, says the Gemara, to make fun of idolatry, make fun of their names. And I could even show you some places where God himself makes fun of the different idols by always comparing them to excrement, to fecal matter, to the stuff that comes out of the behind. And he says that these idol worshippers, that's what they're worshiping. They're worshiping that. And but there's some verses, perhaps we'll get into it another time. I don't want to lose track so much. I'll go off track so much. But nonetheless, the Gemara says that initially, Am Yisrael did not desire idolatry, but they still went after idolatry. Why? Because they knew that once they brought an idol into the house, the rabbis are not going to come visit them anymore. The community is not going to invite them to the weddings, invite them to the bar mitzvah, invite them to the temple. Why? There's an idol worshiper. Get away from us. Not allowed to be next to such a person. Not allowed to discuss anything with such a person, unless that person is open to change and do tshuva. So they figured that since getting a statue will get everybody away from them, that's the perfect plan for their sin, the real sin behind it, which is going and marrying the goyot, going and being intimate with all types of non-Jewish women. Because of course, If they go and find some non-Jewish woman, and the rabbi finds out, the community finds out, they're going to do a number on this guy. Say, hey, what are you doing? How can you do this to your parents? How can you do this to your grandparents? How can you do this to the community? And there's other girls, good girls, Jewish girls you could marry, you could talk to, you could this. I have a shidduch for you, and try to get this person to do tshuva. But this guy's not interested in tshuva. He wants this goya. He wants this girl. He wants the blonde hair, blue-eyed girl that he saw in some magazine. He wants this girl that has 87 husbands just on the way to his house. He wants this. He wants that. That's all he wants. He wants, the immorality. And this is what strategy that many of them used, which is to go after idolatry. But as we learned from the Steipler Gaon, Rabbi Yaakov Kanievsky, alav shalom, that as soon as a person makes a big sin, the ruach tum'ah, the spirit of impurity, falls upon that person, lays upon that person, similar lehavdil to a holy person that has ruach HaKodesh. So the ruach tum'ah, the spirit of impurity, lays upon a person and leads that person to desire more sins. And therefore, after they committed idolatry, committed the sins of immorality, they started liking and even loving the idolatry. So much so that they were willing to die for it. So the prophet Yechezkel talks about this. Talks about these people and their mentality in chapter 23, verse number 19 and 20. The prophet says that she, meaning she's referring to Am Yisrael, increased our adulteries, remembering the days of her youth when she was a promiscuous in the land of Egypt. Meaning, promiscuous is referring to the idolatry that they were after in Egypt. There were people who were idolaters over there. And similar to that type of idolatry, that type of promiscuity, Am Yisrael got to that same point again at the time of the Bet HaMikdash, where it says, the prophet says, she lusted for the concubinage of those whose flesh is the flesh of donkeys and whose issue is the issue of horses. Bsar chamurim bsaram v'zirmat susim zirmatam. The prophet Yechezkel says that the spirit of impurity got to such an extent that the people lusted to be promiscuous with the non-Jews to such an extent that were even willing to be their concubines. And the prophet says, who do you want to be a concubine for? These goyim? Like the Egyptians? Like these Arabs? You want to be a concubine? You want to be intimate with those people? Don't you know that God compares their flesh to the flesh of donkeys and their issue to the issue of horses? What does it mean? Well, does God think that the goyim are donkeys and horses? He created them. Why didn't he just create horses and donkeys? No. This is why every time you read a verse in the Torah, you must look at the commentary by our sages, especially Rashi and the rest of the major commentators, the Rishonim, that elaborated the real meaning behind everything. Without commentary, a person could literally go into never land and end up in a completely new religion. So the Chachamim say, the Radak explains that they lusted to become the after the male servants of the Egyptians. They wanted to be with the concubines. And then in regards to why they're being compared to chamurim, to donkeys, is because chamor is the root of the word chumriyut, which is physicality, which is the opposite of spirituality. And they only desired something physical. And Rashi elaborates, they desired sexuality. And why is Egypt brought into this conversation? Egypt has already been destroyed for centuries at the time of this event. It says because ancient Egypt was the epitome of sexual immorality, which in essence is dedication to bodily pleasure without regard to the higher values of the spirit, and striving for holiness, both of which characterize the essence of Israel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes in Parashat Kedoshim, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani. You be holy because I am holy. The Ramban says this is what distinguishes Am Yisrael from all of the nations. We are the ones that can attain holiness, unlike any other. And he says this is through the acts of intimacy. Same thing what Rashi says, the acts of intimacy, what we learned in the first 6 lectures of this series. The acts of intimacy and how a person treats their sexuality is what is going to determine whether that person can become holy and even will become holy or not. So long as a person is purely animalistic when it comes to intimacy, that person cannot attain holiness. Even if he reads a lot of books, even if he knows a bunch of books by heart. If he looks at that act as simply a physical act, holiness is far away from him. And unfortunately at that time, this is what people wanted to do. They wanted to be physical, they wanted to be intimate, but just for the physical pleasure with zero spirituality connected to it. And follow the ways of the chamorim, follow the ways of the donkeys, follow the way of the horses that spill seed endlessly, just like these unholy non-Jews. That are mentioned here in Yechezkel a few verses later in verse number 37, same chapter 23, where it says that these idol worshippers committed adultery and their blood was in their hands. What is it? Adultery and committing and blood on their hands. They committed adultery with their idols, even their children, it says, but there's also more to it. If they committed adultery, why does blood have to be in their hands? So one way of Chachamim explain is that their adultery led to killing their own wives. Literally murdering their own wives when they found out, or murdering their own husband when they found out. Sometimes murdering the other husband or the other wife led to spilling blood. Another thing is that this adultery led to blood on their hands because they ended up marrying these people and being idol worshippers together and committing their child to sacrifice, taking their children and burning them for the sake of the idol, the Baal. And last but not least is the adultery led to blood in their hands because they ended up spilling seed with their hands, and a mevin yavin. So here we see that the first level of marital union out of the 7, the animalistic one that is just simply looking to sin without any love in it, although it is very common both throughout history and today, it is not only detestable in the eyes of God, as we've seen many examples of it, but it is also detestable by any normal human being that has any moral sense to them, and needless to say, any parent that wants the best for their children, and needless to say, times a million, anyone that looks into the outcome of these actions down the road, whether that down the road is 5, 10, 20 years down the road, or even 5 weeks. Everyone understands that promiscuity and simply being free with your body to the same level as an animal is not going to lead anyone to any place good. No one wants to marry the village bicycle. No one wants to be with the Don Juan that already had 50 wives before he graduated high school. No one wants to be with that person as a serious person for marriage. The only way that people view such people is for lust. And even if those people choose to stop their wicked ways, to remove that stereotype that they created themselves from the minds of people, is going to be very difficult and nearly impossible. And even to remove that lust from their own mind and make themselves normal is very, very difficult. We've tried helping some people that were very promiscuous in their past, and although some of these people adapted to a religious life, and Baruch Hashem start keeping mitzvot, start keeping Shabbat and purity and family purity, and they started keeping kosher and all of the mitzvot, still the one thing that was more difficult to them than any of the other mitzvot is normalizing their mind when it comes to the act of intimacy. Why? The fact that she was promiscuous with so many men, the fact that he was promiscuous with so many women, had created literally a defect in their soul that takes a very long time and an enormous amount of work to fix. It's fixable, but it's very difficult. So a person that is looking for such a life, that's what they're preparing for themselves. That's your dish. Now you're going to say, no, listen, I'm not like these animals. I'm not a living porno star. I'm not one of these people that's looking to be an animal. I'm only going to be with my girlfriend. Or I'm only going to be with my husband, but we're not really keeping mitzvot. We're secular. We violate Shabbat. We don't keep family purity, but still, we love each other. So are we better off? That's the second level. Second level is making a sin, but with a little bit of love. Having some love. Now, of course, this type of animalistic behavior is not very different. Why? Because although there are certain emotions that a person has for his wife that could lead him to not hurt her, not do things that she doesn't like, and vice versa, not hurt him, not do things that he doesn't like, still, the fact that she's not in a mikveh before they're intimate, that once a month where a woman has to go to a mikveh, the fact that they're not keeping all of the purity laws, modesty laws, that means that their act itself is still sinful and, needless to say, is unholy. Now, the love that they have creates two things. One, like I said, it creates some type of, harmony between them where they try not to hurt each other. They try not to kill each other. They try to help each other in some ways. So that's a positive. But the negative that comes out of it is much worse. What is the negative? Those feelings that you have for your boyfriend, that you love him and he's the best, and he's the best guy in the world, and I can't wait till we're married, but we're just not ready yet, but we're just committed. We're almost like we're married, but we're not really married. You know what I mean, Rabbi? Like we really love each other. It's like we were together already for like 1,000,000 years. The stupidity that's in young girls' heads and older girls' heads. She thinks that he loves her and he thinks she loves him and all that little nonsense. Even though they're not married, even though they have no concept of what Kedusha is. That is Maaseh Satan. That is the act, that is literally the strings that Satan is pulling. Why? Because you love each other in your minds. You're going to be more intimate. You're going to make even more sins. Because at least if you didn't love each other, then you're probably not going to be with each other. You're going to do your business, make a bunch of sins. 1 night, 2 nights, 1 week, 2 weeks. Yalla, salamat, go. Find some other animal. Finding another animal may take a little time. There's a break in between. Perhaps you could go eat some straw, or maybe go hunt some deer. But there's a break in between. But the fact that the second level, you love each other in your minds. So what do? You make more sins because it's justifiable. Because I love him and I love her and we love each other. And he sends me a text with the heart. And he sends me a text with the I love you. And I say, oh, boo boo, I love you too. And kuchi kuchi boo. And tuti tuti tu. And genom. Also we're going to love each other until we hate each other because we see the fire and the cold and the nightmare and the hell and everything else. That's Maaseh Satan. That love comes from Satan. He's pulling that string as much and as often as possible. Why? To lead you to make more sins. Meaning that the fact that you elevated yourself in a level by having some mutual harmony and what you want to call love, only justified making even more sins in your mind and justifying them. Someone came to me and asked me, is it okay for me to have a wedding where both people are Jewish because their mothers are Jewish and one of the fathers is Jewish, but one of the fathers is not Jewish? So one person has both parents are Jewish and one has just the mother is Jewish, which makes them halachically Jewish, but the father is not Jewish, intermarriage. Is it okay to, now they're going to get married, is it okay that the non-Jewish father attends the wedding? That was the question. Now, the answer had nothing to do with the question. Why? Because all that matters is not who's on your guest list. All that matters is what kind of wedding are you going to have. Oh no, we're going to have a Jewish wedding. Define Jewish wedding. You know, Rabbi, a chuppah and a rabbi blessing us. That's something you can do on your own in your backyard. You can get a tent from Home Depot, Lowe's, Amazon.com, fantastic website, good prices too. Maybe even Walmart will have a Black Friday sale for you. You could buy a little piece of sheet, have a couple of friends hang it up on the ceiling for you if you want, or a tree. Make sure one of your friends grows a beard, and he can do the wedding. What does it mean? Chuppah does not make the wedding Jewish. Well, rabbi makes it Jewish, right? Well, it depends. If he's a reform rabbi, then it's worse than Christianity in some regards. If he's a rabbi from conservative, he may not even be Jewish. He may not even be straight. He may be a homosexual. Or maybe he's not Jewish if he's reform, most likely. Today, who knows? If he's modern, he may give the bride a kiss and a hug, even though she's a eshet ish. So it's not just any rabbi makes it holy. And also, what are you going to do after the chuppah? If you guys are going to go dance like goyim, the men and the women together, you're no different than the Christian father. In fact, if he's not dancing with anybody, he's better off than you guys. If you're going to dance men and women together, you have a very serious problem. Why? Your wedding is as far from Judaism as can be. The Sefer Hasidim writes nearly 600 years ago, any event that has men and women dancing together promiscuously creates demons. And every person in that party, even if they're not dancing with the opposite gender, even if they're not dancing with somebody else's wife, even if they're dancing with their own wife, or even if they're just sitting at the buffet eating and watching, or not watching, they're still in the same building. Every one of those people is being cursed by heaven, and every one of those people is going to bring some company to their house called demons. Why? Because that's what you created with all of those sins. So instead of being worried of who's going to attend the wedding, let's be real. That father is coming to the wedding whether you like it or not. He's not going to let his child get married without attending. That's number one, especially since neither kid is religious. Number two, make sure you understand what a Jewish wedding is and follow accordingly. Even though you may not be so religious right now, no one wants to start their marriage on a left foot. So they asked for a simple question, but Baruch Hashem, they got a little bit more of a complicated answer that certainly can help them if they follow. You see, Rabotai Yekarim, when a person thinks, oh, I love you and he loves me, and therefore it's okay that we're together, it's not necessarily true in all cases. Because if you're not following the laws of God, family purity is the law of God for Am Yisrael. The Gentiles don't have any laws of purity. They're allowed to be together whenever they want. During the period, before the period, after the period, there's no issues of impurity for the non-Jews. But the Jews have a significant significant ramifications if they do not follow this law. It's karet, meaning you, whether she's your girlfriend or you're married to her, if you are together with her, when she is not pure, she's nida, you have cut yourself off. Cut yourself off from your connection with God. What does that mean? Simple terms. Expect to lose money. You're in danger. Your life is in danger. Your job is in danger. Your marriage is in danger. It's very possible your wife will cheat on you. It's very possible you'll hate your wife tomorrow for no reason. It's possible your kids will revolt against you. Every curse under the sun, you become a candidate for it. Why? You're cut off from the source of blessings. So all that's left is curses. So when a person thinks, oh, I thought maybe option A of being completely promiscuous like a cow, option B, I'm getting a little bit better. It's not so much. Not so much. Level 3. What we called deformed unity. What's deformed unity? Deformed unity is a relationship with people that are more or less religious to the point where they keep the family purity laws. She goes to the mikveh once a month, and she's only together with her husband intimately after she's pure and during the time that she's pure. So this is permissible. He's her husband, he's Jewish, she's Jewish, she went to the mikveh. Why is it still called deformed? It's deformed because it's a permissible act, but it's without love. Doesn't love her for different reasons. She gives him too many headaches. She's annoying. She's this or he's that. He sleeps all day. He doesn't give her any money, any support, any emotional support, any monetary support. Simply, they can't stand each other. But they both have physical needs. And they're religious, so they do the act. This is a deformed unity. And unfortunately, many in the religious world are in this bracket. Not all, but unfortunately more than we want to count. Because they're together because they have physical needs. They follow the law, so they only fulfill their physical needs when permitted, but they do not work on the marriage and on themselves enough to have this act turn into something holy. Needless to say, this act is not naki, it's not pure. This is a horrible place that way too many couples land in due to their ignorance of what we're teaching in this series, due to their arrogance as far as working on themselves and humbling themselves and perfecting themselves and elevating themselves, both as individuals as well as a couple, instead of going to the Holy Torah to elevate their lives and their marriage. They go to all types of psychiatrists, they go to all types of YouTube personalities, they go to their friends, they go to their parents, everywhere except God. It's a sad state of affairs, hence the reason why divorce rates are rising across the board. Baruch Hashem, in the religious world it's less than the secular world, but nonetheless everyone is aware it is rising. What used to be unheard of, today is heard of way too much. So this is the third level where it's unity, it's the marital union, but it's deformed. Because this is not the place you're supposed to be. Then you have the unity, the marital union, but that's where it ends. Just unity. Which is the fourth level, that is the permissible act. Two Jews, she goes to the mikveh, keeps the family purity laws. They're together only during the time that she's pure. And they love each other. So it's not a sin. It's not a sin. And it may have some level of holiness, but very little. Because they're still doing it for the sake of the physical aspect of it. He has a physical need, she has a physical need, and they're allowed to do it. Why not? That is also, level 3 and level 4 are where the vast majority of society is in, and I'm talking about the religious society. Secular and non-Jewish are in the first, maybe the second, either way, they're in trouble. Third and fourth, not exactly in an ideal place, but nonetheless, still better than the first two. So having this unity with love, it's not a sin, but because it does not have a purpose, it's not fulfilling the positive mitzvah. It's not fulfilling the positive mitzvah. The fifth level is called mitzvah, but without love. Now this may seem weird to some people. How could a mitzvah be without love? So first off, the act itself has a purpose. Purpose, let's say, being bringing children to the world. That's mitzvah. Sometimes having children is not possible, whether it's because of the age, or because she's already pregnant, or other different reasons where she's not able to have children. But still there's another mitzvah called mitzvat ona'ah, which is giving joy to the wife, which the husband is obligated to do according to the Torah when he signs that ketubah, the marriage contract. He's obligated to give her three things. One of them is mitzvat ona'ah, which is the physical pleasure when she desires. So he's going into it just with that. He doesn't care for her. He doesn't like her even. Certainly he doesn't love her. But he has a mitzvah to do. Either to bring another child to the world because he wants more kids, or she wants more kids, or because his wife wants him. This is a mitzvah without love. So the mitzvah, the act itself, can attain some low level of holiness, of kedusha, because it has a purpose, like bringing children to the world. But it's not going to be naki. It's not going to be pure, because it does not have love. And since it does not have love, he's not going to do things that are only done if there's love involved. Whether it be the preparation, physically, mentally, spiritually, the way he communicates with her. All of that gone off the agenda. Not part of the agenda altogether. It's still better than the first 4 levels, but certainly it's not the goal. The 6th level is mitzvah with love. This is the ideal. Now before we go into the ideal, there's another level, which is the 7th level, which is called the will of Hashem, achieving the ultimate purpose. This is not something that's understood by anyone today, or achievable by anyone today, as this was the act between our patriarchs and their wives, between David the Melech and his wives, between Avraham and Sarah. What they were able to achieve during their intimacy is something that's not comprehensible to us. Things that were, things that we wouldn't even look at as something even special, they were able to do things that literally would be holier than you putting on your tefillin. So needless to say, attaining knowledge that Adam HaRishon attained with Chava, as the verse says, or attaining knowledge that Elkanah and his wife Chana, or David HaMelech and Bathsheba, that type of knowledge is not something that's comprehensible to us, thereby not attainable. But the sixth level certainly is understood and certainly is attainable and certainly is something that everyone can actually achieve if they put enough effort into it. And this sixth level is the mitzvah with love. And that means that the couple connects their da'at, their knowledge, while fulfilling a mitzvah. And this will help them achieve both the kedusha, the holiness, and naki, purity. Now, what does it mean to achieve yedi'ah, knowledge? As we see, the Ramban is quoting different verses in the Torah. God calls the act done properly knowledge. A man knew his wife. What does it mean when a man knows his wife? That means that their knowledge has become uniform during that time, specifically during the physical touching, where no one else is on their minds or in their hearts to such an extent that they feel like one. The knowledge between a man and his wife is supposed to be to such an extent that he both physically feels his wife and she feels him, and they're emotionally connected as well as mentally. There is nothing else in the world other than their affection and their connection to the other person. Now everybody will say, yeah, when I'm with my wife, when I'm with my husband, I don't think about anybody else. Yeah, sometimes you think about groceries, sometimes you think about what you forgot at work, sometimes you forget about your phone, sometimes you think about somebody else, sometimes you think about somebody. We're not talking about just emptying your mind of the priorities or problems of the day. We're talking about when two people connect their minds and their souls to such an extent that they literally become one. And therefore, their connection is not coming from an emotional state of being, but rather an elevated spiritual state of being. Meaning the act itself, although physically pleasurable, much more than anybody could possibly imagine, that the animals of the streets and the clubs do. But the pleasure is not coming from the physicality, it's not coming from gymnastics, it's not coming from the theatrics, it's not coming from all types of strange thoughts and clothes and all types of weird things that they bring into the bedroom. No, the connection between the two minds, the two souls, that are elevated spiritually is so extraordinary that it supersedes any emotion humanly possible. And thereby any pleasure possible in any other way. Where they're now able to reach the mitzvah, where it has a purpose, whether it's to bring a child to the world, or it's to, like I said, the pleasure, mitzvat ona'ah, but it also becomes literally one of their ways of serving HaKodesh Baruch Hu, elevating their souls much higher and more close to HaKodesh Baruch Hu through their dveikut to each other, their connection to each other. Now, this may seem like something that's far away for many people watching this, listening to this, but I can promise you it's certainly attainable. It's certainly attainable, maybe not today or tomorrow, and maybe not even next week or next month. But if a person works on themselves enough and continues to learn and continues to do what the sages, and needless to say the Ramban is saying in the series, they could eventually reach this. Even if not on a permanent and consistent basis. The pleasure they will have and fulfillment they will have by even attaining it once or once in a while will be enough to give them the motivation to continue striding for it. Meaning, a person even attaining this a single time will give him or her the motivation to continue serving HaKodesh Baruch Hu even more than they did before, because they feel something unlike anything else you could imagine as a result of this act. It will actually drive them to work to improve their marriage even further. It'll actually affect them to improve themselves as a human being even more so, even if they were to taste this pleasure a single time. And even if they knew ahead of time, it'd take them another year to maybe get there once, another 5 years to maybe get there one more time. That little bit of pleasure will be enough. Now, of course, you can't show people pleasure. You can't explain it. At least I can't more than what I just did. But I can assure you that if a person understood the small piece of Olam Haba that is available to every Jewish couple, that's available to every couple technically, that can attain holiness by following these footsteps, following these holy teachings, they would never look at life the same. It would drive them to actually become a better servant of Hashem. Hence the reason why such a series is so critical. Because it's not just about telling you what's allowed, what's not allowed, go do gymnastics, go stop being like a horse. No. There's more to it. There's a whole lot more to it. And if a person would simply stride and try to elevate themselves, they'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And the beauty of this all is that you don't have to reach the final destination to see that things are better, to feel that things are better. You'll actually see things along the way. You'll feel things along the way. But all of them are like a drop in a bucket in comparison to the ultimate destination. Now, a person that is serious about life, both in this world and the next, will try their best. Now, their spouse may not be ready for it, may not be willing to do it, may not be interested in doing it. That interest, that willpower, will come in time after they see your actions. Don't tell them, you need to do this so we can do this. That's not going to motivate anybody. If you become that, if you elevate yourself spiritually, and thereby become a better person, and thereby become a better servant of Hashem, and thereby become a better husband or wife, and thereby become a better son to your old parents, and thereby become a better daughter to your old parents, and thereby becoming a better person in the community, a better, more honest person, and so on and so forth. If you elevate yourself, if you do the preparation, and also have some of that preparation affect you when you are intimate with your spouse, that in itself will be the motivation that your spouse will need to get them going to. Many times people think that they could motivate their spouse by pressure. Do this, or else I'm leaving. Do this, or else I'm not going to talk to you. If you're married to maybe a ox, that may work. Horse, possibly too. Just make sure they don't kick you in the face. But if you're married to a human, needless to say, if you're married to a Jewish person, that stuff's not going to work. And even if it works, it's only going to be temporary, till they kick you in the face. You want to lead? Lead by example. More than anything else, if a person wants to elevate their life, their marriage, their parenting, their everything, and more than anything else, their servitude of HaKodesh Baruch Hu, they can do this through this and more than anything else. And they'll feel a small pleasure that's a piece of Olam Haba. Now, is it easy? No. But it's certainly attainable. And Yeh Ratzon, that each and every single one of us strives to attain this. Strives to attain both Kedusha and to be Naki, to be pure in the eyes of our Creator. To use all of the tools that He created us. The fire, the air, the water, the earth that He created us. That we have this flesh, we have this body, that we have this mind that doesn't end to attain these things. Because the Ramban says, to finish this particular section, that the reason, the secret reason why this is what it is because when a drop of semen is drawn in holiness and purity, it comes from a source of wisdom, knowledge and understanding, which is the brain. When a person strives to attain these things, that means that whatever is going to come out of this person is not going to be coming from the same place. You see, your brain produces what comes out of your body. If a person is simply at level 1 or 2, looking for a physical pleasure, then their brain will produce the seed that is associated with that. The seed of the horse, the seed of the donkey. They'll be pleasurable physically for a moment, but spiritually destructive. And they'll feel that destruction moments after they complete that climatic moment, because they can't stand the person that's next to them. In fact, if they could somehow transport to a different planet at that moment, they would do it. 100% of the cases. Even if they thought they loved each other. If a person is in the 3rd or 4th level, where at least it's a permissible act, with or without love, but needless to say, a permissible act, the brain will produce a different type of seed, different types of hormones, different type of spiritualities connected to what the body will produce. And therefore, what comes out of that person and what's the result of what comes out is a magnitude of difference between that and the horse and the donkey before them. If a person elevates themselves further to doing it for the sake of a mitzvah, with or without love, is a world of difference. If it's without love, then it's certainly better than the first 4 levels. Still going to be missing the purity, still going to be missing most of the holiness. But nonetheless, what their brain produces will come from certain parts of their mind, from their wisdom, from their knowledge, from their understanding, but very minuscule levels, very minimal ones. But if a person attains That sixth level. That level that is fulfilling a mitzvah with love. That means that everything that they produce, everything that's coming out of their body, is going to be completely made up of their chokhmah, bina, vadat, their wisdom, their knowledge, and their understanding. No foreign parts, no animalistic, pure holiness. And what comes out of it is what it's going to produce. Holier children, holier marriage, deeper love and affection to their spouse, an elevated existence and connection to their Creator and even to their community. Simply, they're a different person after the act, both physically and otherwise. There is literally no way to compare that sixth level to any of the other levels beforehand, in any way, shape, or form. Even the one that's fifth, that's close to it, but it's not close enough. Because anyone that knows a little bit about cooking or chemistry knows that if you have something that's completely pure versus something that's partial, even if that partiality is 90% pure and 10% partial, 80%, 70%, that makes a difference. In fact, it makes all the difference. So when a person attains that sixth level, it's literally something that a person can strive for in this world. Both their spiritual, emotional, and needless to say, their physical pleasure will be unlike any other. Making this whole series worth it just for people to understand this and strive for it. This is why the prophets spoke about this. Spoke about this in multiple verses. Attaining knowledge, being the place that a God wants us to get to. With the prophet Hosea in chapter 2, in verse 22, says, "Ve'arastich li be'emunah ve'yada'at et Adonai." HaKodesh Baruch Hu says to Am Yisrael that he, after we do tshuva, and he destroys all of these enemies and so on, he says, I will betroth you to me with fidelity, and you will know Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that a person can attain this knowledge of God through this. This is why the prophet Shmuel says, "Vayada Elkanah et Chana ishto." That Elkanah knew his wife. God says, I want you to know me too. But not like the idol worshippers in their distorted, perverted, disgusting minds think that God knows man with some physical act. Only their demented idol can be that way. Our holy God says that he wants us to know him. And the way we could know him is through our marital union with our spouse. Because that marital union, in its purest form, proper time, proper mindset, can elevate the souls of both people to the point of knowledge of God. And knowledge is not something that is close to anything else. Belief, understanding, those are all good, but they're nothing in comparison to knowledge. By getting to know your spouse in accordance to the Torah, you can also know God. Yeh Ratzon that each and every single one of us will at the very least do our best to get to that point of knowledge of God. Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow we will have our Stump the Rabbi shiur, where you guys could ask some questions. And Be'ezrat Hashem will provide some answers from the Torah. Anyone that wants to support our organization, all the amazing things that the organization does, whether it's feeding the poor in Israel, or the movies, or the lectures, or the many employees and projects, can go to our website, be'ezrathashem.org, or donate on the app, or donate here on Facebook, or you can go to the bhdonate.org, or you can send a check. There's 1.5 million different ways that a person can contribute, and even if they can't contribute monetarily, you could certainly contribute by sharing these shiurim with your friends, with your family, with religious people, with non-religious people. You could simply share this series with everybody, even goyim, because this certainly affects all of mankind. Because if we were simply holy, the way that the sages teach in such private moments, certainly would be much holier people and much holier world in public. Be'ezrat Hashem, we succeed. To be honest with you, to give this lecture is a nightmare. If it was up to me, I wouldn't do it. There's going to be some graphic details. Not midrashim, not gemarot. We did that already. Where is Gehenom in halacha? What did the Hasidim actually say about punishment? Is there suffering? Is there a physical place of fire or snow? We're simply trying to verify that Hashem takes vengeance against the sinners or not.
Do you believe that angels, demons exist?
We're doing a Ouija board video today.
This is by far the largest near-death experience study that has ever been conducted.
What happens the moment you die? Person needs to know that he's not going to be here forever.
Yeah, I went to a place of timelessness.
It was me judging myself on what I could have done better.
Not the rebuke of some book. This is a rebuke of HaKodesh Baruch Hu when we go up to Shamayim.